My name is Brooke, and at 34 years old, I never imagined a single phone call could shatter the perfect life I thought I had built. The call came at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon while I was presenting to the hospital board. My husband Derek's name flashed on my screen, and when I answered, his voice was pure panic. "Come home now," he said, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Before I tell you what I found when I walked through that door, let me know where you're watching from. Please subscribe if you want to hear how one phone call changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Looking back now, I realize the signs were always there, hidden behind the facade of what everyone called the perfect marriage. Derek and I had met 12 years ago at Northwestern University, both of us bright-eyed pre-med students with dreams of changing the world through medicine. We spent countless nights in the library, quizzing each other on anatomy while sharing cold pizza and lukewarm coffee. He had this way of making even the most grueling study sessions feel like adventures, turning medical terminology into silly songs that still pop into my head during surgeries. When I got pregnant unexpectedly, in my third year, everything changed. Derek made the decision that would define our entire relationship. He dropped out, insisting that one of us needed to finish medical school, and it should be me since I was further along in the program. I will never forget the day he held my hand in that tiny apartment bathroom, two pink lines staring back at us, and promised he would support my dreams no matter what. The pregnancy ended in miscarriage 6 weeks later, but by then, Derek had already withdrawn from school and taken a job at a pharmaceutical company to support us. Everyone thought he was a saint. My mother practically built him a shrine in her living room, telling anyone who would listen about her wonderful son-in-law who sacrificed his medical career for his wife. My friends envied me constantly, reminding me how lucky I was to have found a man who put my career first. Even my colleagues at the hospital would joke about cloning Derek for their own marriages. He seemed to embrace the role, completely transforming into the perfect house husband while I climbed the ladder at Chicago Presbyterian Hospital. Our home reflected this perfect image we had created, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Naperville, complete with the white picket fence that seemed almost too cliché to be real. Derek maintained it all with obsessive attention to detail. The lawn was always perfectly manicured, each blade of grass seemingly measured to the exact same height. Inside, everything had its place, from the alphabetized spice rack to the color-coordinated closets. Neighbors would stop by just to admire his seasonal decorations, which grew more elaborate each year. He threw himself into community life with the same intensity he once applied to studying medicine. Tuesday mornings meant volunteering at the church food pantry, where Pastor Williams called him their most reliable helper. Wednesday afternoons were spent coaching Little League, teaching kids the fundamentals of baseball with endless patience. Thursday evenings brought the neighborhood watch meetings he had initiated after a series of break-ins 3 blocks over. Saturdays meant organizing charity drives. Sunday mornings meant teaching Sunday school. His calendar was fuller than mine, and I loved him for it. But something shifted 6 months ago so gradually that I only see it clearly in hindsight. It started with small things that seemed meaningless in isolation. I found him in my home office one night at 3 a.m, sitting at my desk in complete darkness. When I flicked on the light, he jumped like I had caught him committing murder. He claimed he could not sleep and was looking for a book to read, but my medical journals were untouched and my computer was warm. I dismissed it as insomnia, maybe stress from planning the church fundraiser. Then came the missing prescription pads. I always kept spare pads in my work bag for emergencies, a habit from my residency days. One morning, I reached for them to write a prescription for a colleague's daughter and found them gone. When I asked Derek, he looked genuinely confused, suggesting maybe I had left them at the hospital. 2 weeks later, another pad vanished. Then another. I started locking them in my desk drawer at work, telling myself I was becoming forgetful with age. The money issues started around the same time. Our joint account showed cash withdrawals I did not remember making. 500 here, 300 there, always from ATMs near the hospital, where I could have plausibly stopped. Derek handled our finances, always had, since I worked such long hours, and he assured me they were for household expenses, new lawn equipment, car maintenance, donations to the church. His explanations made perfect sense, and I felt guilty for questioning him. His new book club raised an eyebrow, but only slightly. Every Tuesday evening he would dress carefully in business casual clothes and drive to what he said was a book club for former medical students who never finished their degrees. It seemed therapeutic, a way to process the sacrifice he had made for our family. When I offered to host one week, he quickly declined, saying the group preferred to rotate between members' homes and it was not his turn for months. I was secretly relieved, too exhausted from 12-hour shifts to play hostess. The physical changes were harder to ignore. Derek had always been fit, but suddenly he was losing weight rapidly. His face grew gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. When I expressed concern, he showed me a new workout app on his phone, complete with before and after photos of other users. He was training for a marathon, he said, wanting to accomplish something significant before his 40th birthday. The explanations satisfied me enough to stop asking questions. His paranoia should have been my wake-up call. He installed security cameras without discussing it with me, claiming the neighborhood break-ins had him worried. Every night before bed, he would check each window and door multiple times, sometimes getting up hours later to check again. The doorbell made him jump like a soldier with PTSD. When packages arrived, he would watch from the window as I retrieved them, as if expecting them to explode. That final morning, he was different in a way that now seems like a goodbye. He woke me up an hour early, with breakfast in bed, something he had not done in years. French toast made from scratch, fresh squeezed orange juice coffee, exactly how I liked it with just a splash of cream. He sat on the edge of our bed watching me eat with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. His hands shook slightly as he poured more coffee, and when I asked if he was okay, he pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "I love you more than you will ever know," he whispered into my hair, and something in his voice made my chest tighten. When I pulled back to look at him, tears were streaming down his face. He blamed it on the onions he had chopped for his planned dinner, but French toast does not need onions. I should have stayed home. Every instinct in my body was screaming that something was wrong, but I had that board meeting, the one about expanding the pediatric ward I had been planning for 2 years. The presentation was going perfectly when my phone buzzed at 2:47. I had just finished explaining the projected outcomes for childhood cancer treatments when Derek's name appeared. He never called during work unless it was an emergency. My hands trembled as I excused myself from the conference room, 15 board members watching me with barely concealed irritation. The moment I heard his voice, I knew my life was about to change forever. The drive home was the longest 23 minutes of my life, each red light feeling like a personal assault as my mind cycled through increasingly terrifying scenarios. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I had to consciously remind myself to breathe. The rational part of my brain, the part trained in medical school to remain calm in crisis, was at war with the primal terror coursing through my veins. I tried calling Derek back 14 times. Each attempt went straight to voicemail, his cheerful, recorded message mocking my growing panic. "Hi, you have reached Derek Thompson. Sorry I missed your call, but leave a message and I will get back to you as soon as possible." The normalcy of his tone made everything feel more surreal. Between attempts, I called our neighbour Patricia, then Tom from across the street, then even cranky Mr. Henderson, who lived 3 houses down, and complained about everything. Nobody answered. As I drove, memories kept surfacing unbidden, like pieces of a puzzle I had not realised I was assembling. 3 weeks ago, Derek had come home from his book club with a scratch across his cheek. He said he had walked into a branch while helping load books into someone's car, but the mark looked more like fingernails than wood. A month before that, I had found a receipt in his pocket for a hotel in Milwaukee, dated on a day he was supposedly at a church retreat. When I asked about it, he said he had grabbed the wrong receipt at a gas station, and I had believed him because why would Derek lie about something so small? The weight loss made more sense now, viewed through the lens of growing dread. Stress, not marathon training, had carved away at his body. The security cameras were not about protecting us from outside threats, but monitoring who might come to our door. The constant checking of locks was not paranoia about burglars, but fear of something much more personal catching up with him. Every odd behaviour suddenly felt like a warning sign I had been too busy or too trusting to read. My medical training kicked in as I drove my mind automatically categorising possible scenarios like differential diagnoses. Mental breakdown was at the top of my list. Derek's mother had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in her 50s, though Derek claimed she had shown signs earlier that the family had ignored. Genetics could be cruel that way, mental illness lying dormant until stress triggered its emergence. I had seen it happen to colleagues, the pressure of maintaining perfect lives causing cracks that eventually became chasms. Physical illness was another possibility. Brain tumours could cause personality changes and paranoid behaviour. Early onset dementia, though rare at his age, was not impossible. Even certain infections could affect behaviour if they reached the brain. I found myself hoping for something medical, something I could understand and treat, something with a clear diagnosis and treatment plan. The alternative that Derek had been hiding something deliberately was too painful to fully consider. 5 miles from home, I saw the first police car racing in the direction of our neighbourhood, then another, and another. My heart rate, already elevated, shot into dangerous territory. I pulled over to let an ambulance pass its sirens, wailing a song of someone else's tragedy, and prayed it was not heading where I was. But when I turned back onto the road, I found myself following in its wake like a reluctant funeral procession. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek, 8 words that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Do not call anyone. Just come. Trust me. The last 2 words were almost laughable given the circumstances, but something in their desperation made me pocket my phone without dialing 911. Whatever was happening, Derek wanted me there first, needed me to see something before anyone else got involved. The doctor in me knew this was probably stupid, potentially dangerous, but the wife in me pressed harder on the accelerator. 3 blocks from our house, I had to pull over. My hands were shaking so violently I could not maintain control of the car. I sat there for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, trying to calm my breathing using the technique I taught anxious pediatric patients. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out through the mouth for 8. It barely helped, but it was enough to get me moving again. Whatever was waiting for me at home, I needed to face it. Running away was not an option when every fibre of my being was screaming that Derek needed me. Our street looked different somehow, like a movie set version of the life I had left just 8 hours earlier. Everything was too bright, too sharp, as if someone had turned up the contrast on reality. I noticed details I had never seen before, like the crack in the Johnsons' driveway that looked like a lightning bolt, or the way Mrs. Chen's garden gnomes were all facing our house, like tiny ceramic witnesses. There were cars I did not recognise parked along the street. A blue Honda, a black SUV with tinted windows, a silver minivan with an Indiana license plate. The sight of our house made me slam on the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked against my chest. Our perfect white colonial with its perfect green lawn looked wrong, violated somehow. The front door was wide open, not just unlocked, but gaping like a mouth frozen in a scream. Derek's car sat in the driveway at an odd angle, as if he had parked in a hurry. One of my rose bushes, the ones I had planted on our first anniversary, was trampled flat against the ground. I sat in my car for another moment, gathering courage I did not feel. Through our open door, I could see shadows moving inside, multiple figures passing by windows like ghosts in a haunted house. Derek was in there with strangers had invited them or been invaded by them, and either option terrified me equally. Part of me wanted to drive away to pretend I had never received his call to maintain the illusion of our perfect life for just a little longer. But I had taken an oath once to do no harm, and abandoning my husband in crisis felt like the ultimate violation of that promise. My legs felt like water as I walked up our driveway, each step requiring conscious effort. The front door seemed to grow larger as I approached, transforming from an entrance into a portal between my old life and whatever waited on the other side. I could hear voices now, multiple people talking over each other, the sound of a baby crying, Derek's voice rising above it all, saying words I could not quite make out. The smell hit me as I reached the threshold formula, and fear sweat, and something else, desperation maybe, if desperation had a scent. I stepped through my front door and into a nightmare that was somehow worse than anything my panicked mind had conjured during that drive home. The scene in my living room looked like a tornado had torn through our carefully curated life, leaving destruction and strangers in its wake. Our coffee table was overturned photo albums scattered across the floor, like dead birds, their pages spread wide, displaying moments I no longer recognized as real. The antique mirror we had bought on our honeymoon was cracked down the middle, splitting my reflection into two different women, neither of whom I recognized. Derek stood in the kitchen doorway, and for a moment I did not recognize him either. His face was the color of spoiled milk sweat pouring down his cheeks like tears, though his eyes were bone-dry and wild. His shirt, the blue one I had given him last Christmas, was soaked through and clinging to his chest, which rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous in equal measure. But it was the three strangers in my home that made my mind stutter to a complete stop. Two women and a man, though I quickly realized the man was actually a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17. The first woman was blonde, pretty, in a tired way, holding a baby that could not have been more than 6 months old. She wore yoga pants and a Northwestern University sweatshirt that made my stomach lurch. The second woman was younger, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun and eyes red from crying. The teenager stood protectively near the blonde woman, his jaw set, with a rage that seemed too old for his young face. Brooke Derek started his voice cracking on my name like it was a foreign word he had never pronounced before. I need you to listen. I need you to understand. These are God, I do not know how to say this. These are my other families. The words hit me like a physical blow, making me grip the doorframe to stay upright. Other families, plural, not a mistress, not an affair, but entire other families. The room started to spin, and I heard someone laughing, a high, hysterical sound that I only belatedly realized was coming from my own throat. The blonde woman shifted the baby to her other hip, and I saw a wedding ring on her finger, a simple gold band that looked exactly like the one I had picked out for Derek 12 years ago. "This is Jennifer," Derek continued, gesturing weakly at the blonde woman. "We have been married for 8 years. She lives in Milwaukee. That's our daughter Emma, and our son, that's Tyler." The teenage boy's hands clenched into fists at being claimed this way, his whole body radiating the desire to punch the man he had called Dad, probably his whole life. "And this is Amanda from Indianapolis. We have been married for 5 years. She is 6 months pregnant. I had not noticed the pregnancy at first, too focused on the chaos and confusion, but now I could see the gentle swell under Amanda's loose sweater. She had one hand pressed protectively over her belly, the other wiping endlessly at tears that would not stop falling. Her wedding ring was different, a silver band with small diamonds, and I found myself fixating on it because looking at anything else might make me shatter completely. Jennifer was the first to speak directly to me, her voice steady despite the circumstances. He told me you were his sister, said you had special needs after a car accident, and he took care of you. That is why he could only visit every other week. I believed him for 8 fucking years. Her voice broke on the last word, and the baby started crying harder, sensing her mother's distress. Amanda's story came out in broken sobs. He said he was a medical consultant, travelled for work, used your name, your credentials, built this whole fake medical practice. My parents, they were so proud I married a doctor. We had our wedding at their country club. 200 guests. He made a speech about saving lives. The bitter irony of it made her laugh a sharp sound like breaking glass. My brain was trying to process the logistics of it all, the medical part of my mind taking over because the emotional part had completely shut down. 3 women, 3 different cities. Every other week in Milwaukee meant 8 years of lies. 5 years in Indianapolis meant he had started that relationship while I was working 100-hour weeks during my fellowship. The teenage boy Tyler was old enough that Jennifer had been pregnant when Derek and I were planning our own wedding. The math of betrayal was staggering, each number a fresh wound. Derek started moving toward me, and all 3 women reacted instantly. Jennifer stepped back, shielding the baby. Amanda pressed herself against the wall. I held up my hand, and he stopped like he had hit an invisible barrier. The man I had shared a bed with for over a decade was a stranger wearing my husband's face, and the thought of him touching me made my skin crawl with revulsion I had never experienced before. You used my prescription pads, I said, my voice surprisingly calm, the doctor taking over completely now. You forged my signature, created a fake practice. That is federal fraud, Derek. You could have cost me my license, everything I worked for. The violation of it was almost worse than the infidelity. He had not just betrayed our marriage, he had weaponized my career, turned my life's work into a tool for his deception. Jennifer pulled out a folder from a diaper bag, her movements sharp with barely controlled rage. He bought our house with money he said came from his pharmaceutical sales. But look at these documents. Your name is on everything, forgeries but good ones. You have been paying for my life, our children's lives, and you did not even know we existed. The papers she showed me were horrifyingly familiar. My signature perfectly replicated on loan documents, bank transfers, even medical forms. Amanda had her own evidence pulled up on her phone. Social media posts where Derek had used photos from medical conferences I had attended, cropping me out and claiming the achievements as his own. He had created an entire false identity as Dr. Derek Thompson, complete with a LinkedIn profile listing my publications under his name. She showed me message after message to her family, elaborate lies about surgical procedures he had never performed, patients. He had never treated a career that existed only in the fiction he had created. Tyler finally spoke, his voice shaking with adolescent fury and pain. He coached my baseball team, came to every game when he was in town, taught me to throw a curveball, said he was proud of me. Was any of it real, or was I just another prop in his sick game? The boy's pain hit me harder than anything else. This child who had grown up thinking Derek was his hero, now discovering his father was nothing but smoke and mirrors. The financial devastation started to reveal itself as Jennifer and Amanda compared notes, and I pulled out my phone to check accounts Derek had told me not to worry about. The second mortgage on our house I had never authorized. Credit cards maxed out in my name with charges in 3 different cities. My retirement account, the one I had been building since residency, drained down to almost nothing. The equity line of credit taken out for renovations that never happened. He had been funding 3 complete lives on my income, bleeding me dry while I worked myself to exhaustion to earn more. Derek sank into a kitchen chair, his face in his hands, and for a moment the only sound was the baby crying and Amanda's quiet sobs. When he finally looked up, his expression was that of a little boy caught in a lie he could not talk his way out of, desperate and pathetic in equal measure. I never meant for it to go this far. It started with Jennifer when you were so busy with medical school. I thought I could manage it. Then Amanda happened and I could not choose. I loved all of you. I wanted to make everyone happy. The delusion of it, the narcissism of thinking he could maintain 3 separate families indefinitely, was almost more shocking than the betrayal itself. He genuinely seemed to believe he was some kind of victim of circumstance rather than the architect of an elaborate fraud that had destroyed multiple lives. The man I had thought was self-sacrificing and devoted was actually a pathological liar who had turned deception into an art form, and I had been both his primary victim and his unknowing accomplice. Jennifer was the one who started putting the pieces together out loud, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. I found out about Amanda first. My friend saw them at a restaurant in Indianapolis, sent me a photo, asking if that was my Derek with another woman. I hired a private investigator. When he found Amanda, we thought that was it, just one affair. But the investigator kept digging and found you, Brooke, the real wife, the first wife, the one funding this whole sick operation. She pulled out her phone, showing me screenshots of text messages between her and Amanda from the past week, their shared discovery turning them from rivals into allies. They had pieced together Derek's schedule, realized how he had compartmentalized his life into neat little segments. Mondays through Wednesdays with me in Chicago, Thursdays through Sundays alternating between Milwaukee and Indianapolis. The book club that met every Tuesday was his transition day, driving to Jennifer's while I thought he was discussing literature with former medical students. Amanda stood up, pacing now, her hands gesturing wildly as her story poured out. He was perfect at first, thoughtful, attentive, everything you want in a partner. Showed up at my work with flowers, knew exactly what to say when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, held me through the grief, proposed at the spot where we first met. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. She laughed bitterly. He even faked medical emergencies to explain his absences, said he was on call, had to rush back for surgery. I was so proud of my husband at the Hero Doctor. Tyler had been recording everything on his phone, and he played back a voicemail Derek had left just 2 days ago. "Hey buddy, just wanted to say I am proud of how you are handling your SATs. Remember what we talked about, stay calm and trust your preparation. Cannot wait to celebrate with you this weekend. Love you, son." The casual cruelty of maintaining such normal fatherly interactions while his house of cards was collapsing was breathtaking. The baby, Emma, started fussing harder, and Jennifer bounced her automatically while continuing her revelations. He never missed a birthday. Coached Tyler's team to the state championships, helped with homework every night he was home. The neighbours thought he was Father of the Year. My mother kept asking when we would have another baby so he could have more kids to dote on. The irony tastes like poison now. My phone started buzzing with notifications as news of the situation somehow began spreading. Colleagues from the hospital, friends, even my mother calling repeatedly. Derek's web of lies had created a gravitational pull that was drawing in everyone we knew. I let it ring, unable to imagine explaining this to anyone when I could barely comprehend it myself. Each call felt like another person learning that our perfect marriage, the one they had all envied, was nothing but an elaborately constructed fraud. Amanda suddenly rushed to the bathroom, morning sickness or stress or both overwhelming her. Jennifer and I stood there, two strangers united by the same man's betrayal, listening to her retch while Derek sat frozen at the kitchen table. Tyler had moved to the window, watching as more cars pulled up outside. The neighbours were starting to gather on their lawns, drawn by the drama, like moths to a flame. Our private catastrophe was becoming public entertainment. When Amanda returned pale and shaking, she had more evidence on her phone. Credit card statements showing charges at jewellery stores, 3 different engagement rings purchased over the years, hotel reservations in cities none of us lived in, suggesting there might be even more women we had not discovered yet. Dating app profiles that were still active, Derek's photo, smiling out from screens with different names, different professions, different life stories. The scope of his deception was expanding with each revelation. Jennifer's investigator had done thorough work. She showed us property records for a condo in Detroit that Derek had apparently been renting for the past 6 months, utility bills in his name for an address in St. Louis, a storage unit in Gary, Indiana, paid for annually in cash. Each discovery was another fracture in the facade, revealing not just a cheater, but someone who had turned living multiple lives into a complex operation requiring careful planning and endless deception. My medical training recognized the pathology before my heart could accept it. This was not simple infidelity or even bigamy. This was something deeper, a compulsive need to create and maintain multiple identities, to be different people to different women. The psychology textbooks I had studied called it various things, but seeing it manifest in my own living room, in the man I had trusted with everything, made those clinical terms feel hollow and inadequate. Derek finally tried to speak again, his voice barely a whisper. "I know you will not believe me, but I did love all of you. Each relationship was real to me. When I was with you, Brooke, I was the supportive husband you needed. With Jennifer, I was the father and provider. With Amanda, I was starting fresh, being the man I wished I could be all the time. I kept thinking I would find a way to make it work, to keep everyone happy without anyone getting hurt." The narcissism of his explanation made all 3 of us react simultaneously. Jennifer laughed, sharp and bitter. Amanda started crying harder. I found myself moving toward him, not sure if I wanted to slap him or shake him until he understood the magnitude of what he had done. Tyler beat me to it, crossing the room in 3 quick strides to stand over his father, trembling with rage. "You ruined everything," the boy said, his voice breaking between childhood and manhood. "Mum gave up her career to raise us because you said your job needed you to travel. She trusted you. We all trusted you. You made us into a joke. How am I supposed to go back to school, knowing everyone will be talking about this? How is Emma supposed to grow up knowing her father is a professional liar?" It was then that we heard the sirens getting closer. Someone had called the police, probably one of the gathering neighbours who sensed the situation escalating. Derek's face went even paler, if that was possible, as he realised his carefully segmented worlds were not just colliding, but exploding in the most public way possible. Everything he had worked to keep separate was converging in this moment, in this room, with consequences he could no longer control or compartmentalise. Jennifer made the decision for all of us. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 herself. "My name is Jennifer Martinez, and I need to report a case of bigamy and fraud. I am at 347 Maple Street in Naperville with 2 other women who have been illegally married to the same man. He has been using one woman's medical credentials to commit identity theft. We need officers here now." The police arrived within minutes, 3 squad cars pulling up with lights flashing. But no sirens having been briefed, this was a domestic situation that was complicated, but not immediately violent. 2 officers came to the door, while others began managing the growing crowd of neighbours. The lead officer, a woman named Detective Sarah Coleman, took in the scene with professional calm that I envied. She had probably seen everything in her 20 years on the force, but even she looked slightly stunned as Jennifer, Amanda, and I took turns explaining the situation. Derek tried to minimize everything at first, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that we were not legally married in multiple states, that the relationships overlapped but were not concurrent. But as Detective Coleman started asking specific questions and reviewing the documents we had all brought as evidence, his elaborate construction began collapsing like a house with no foundation. Each lie he told to cover another lie only made things worse, creating a cascade of contradictions that even he could not keep straight anymore. The detective separated all of us for individual statements, and I found myself in my own bedroom, sitting on the bed I had shared with Derek just that morning, talking to a young officer who looked like he was fresh out of the academy. He took notes as I walked through the timeline of my marriage, the warning signs I had missed the prescription pads, the forged documents. Each detail felt like another nail in the coffin of my former life. Through the window, I could see news vans starting to arrive. Someone had tipped off the media, and the story of a respected doctor's husband with 3 families was apparently too salacious to ignore. I watched a reporter I recognized from the evening news standing on my lawn, gesturing at our house as she spoke into a camera. The text messages started flooding in from colleagues who were watching it unfold live on television. My professional reputation, built over years of dedication and hard work, was being shattered in real time. Jennifer's son Tyler was interviewed in the living room, and I could hear his voice through the walls, angry and broken, as he described the father he thought he knew. The baby Emma was crying again, that helpless infant wail that made my medical instincts kick in despite everything. I found myself walking back out to check on her, the doctor in me, unable to ignore a distressed child, even as my world burned down around me. Amanda was in the kitchen with another officer, and through her tears, she was explaining how Derek had convinced her family he was a renowned surgeon. Her parents had lent them money for their house based on his supposed income. Her brother had invested in a medical startup Derek claimed to be launching. The financial fraud extended beyond just the 3 women, reaching into extended families who had believed in the fiction Derek had created. Derek's mother arrived then, and her presence shifted everything. Patricia Thompson was a small woman in her 70s, but she walked through the chaos like she had expected this day would come eventually. She looked at her son surrounded by police and the wreckage of his deceptions, and her first words were not comfort, but confession. I should have gotten him help years ago. He has been doing this since high school. Different girlfriends who never knew about each other. I thought he would grow out of it. The revelation that this was a pattern, not an isolated incident of midlife crisis or temporary insanity, made everything worse and somehow clearer. Derek was not a good man who had made bad choices. He was someone with a fundamental inability to maintain a singular, honest existence. His mother's words confirmed what my medical training had been telling me. This was pathological behavior that had been enabled and hidden for decades. Detective Coleman gathered all of us together to explain the legal situation. The bigamy charges were clear-cut, as Derek had legally married all 3 of us with proper documentation, just in different states. The fraud charges were more complex, but potentially more serious. Using my medical credentials, forging my signature on financial documents, creating false identities for professional purposes. These were federal crimes that would involve multiple agencies. Derek was looking at significant prison time. The detective also gently explained that all 3 marriages would need to be legally dissolved, that none of us could be considered his actual wife at this point, since the subsequent marriages were invalid from the start. The children, however, were legitimate regardless of the marriage status, and custody would need to be determined through family court. The legal maze ahead of us was daunting, years of procedures and paperwork to untangle the web Derek had woven. A financial crimes investigator arrived and immediately began documenting the monetary aspects of the fraud. When he tallied up the initial numbers just from what we could show him, immediately the total was staggering. Over $2 million had been moved, hidden, spent, or stolen across the various accounts and properties. My entire life savings, earned through endless hours of saving lives and sacrificing sleep, had been distributed across 3 states to maintain Derek's elaborate deception. Jennifer's investigator had continued working even as we dealt with the police, and he called with another bombshell. There was a 4th woman, Michelle in Detroit, the condo we had discovered earlier. She was 23, a recent college graduate who thought she was dating a successful entrepreneur named David, who traveled internationally for business. They had been together 6 months and he had just proposed last week. She was at the condo now, wondering why David had not returned her calls for 2 days. The news hit all of us differently. Jennifer threw up in the kitchen sink. Amanda collapsed into a chair, holding her belly and sobbing. I felt something inside me finally break completely, the last thread of denial snapping. 4 women, 4 complete lives. The man I had married was a serial emotional predator who collected families. Like some people collected stamps, each one carefully catalogued and maintained until the collection grew too large to manage. Tyler had been live streaming parts of the confrontation, and his video was already going viral. The comments ranged from supportive to cruel, and Jennifer snatched his phone away when she saw what people were writing about all of us. But it was too late. The story was out there, spreading across social media like wildfire. We were becoming a cautionary tale in real time. Our private pain transformed into public entertainment. Derek was eventually handcuffed and led out of our house past the cameras and gawking neighbours, his head down and shoulders slumped. He looked smaller, somehow, diminished without his elaborate constructions to prop him up. As they put him in the squad car, he looked back at the house one last time, and I saw not remorse but regret at being caught. Even then, at the absolute bottom, he was probably already thinking about how to talk his way out of this. Detective Coleman gave us each her card and information about victim services. She had seen enough of these cases to know that the arrest was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. The criminal case would take months, if not years. The civil proceedings to untangle the finances would be even longer. The emotional recovery might never fully happen. But she also said something that stuck with me. You 3 are not victims. You are survivors, and you have each other now. As the police cars pulled away and the crowds began to disperse, Jennifer, Amanda, and I stood in my destroyed living room. 3 strangers bound together by the same man's betrayal. Tyler sat with Emma, his teenage awkwardness disappearing as he gently rocked his half-sister. The house felt different, like it belonged to someone else, which I supposed it did. It had belonged to the woman who believed her husband was devoted and faithful, and that woman no longer existed. In the immediate aftermath, we discovered we needed each other more than we could have imagined. Jennifer had the investigator and the knowledge of how to track Derek's deceptions. Amanda had an accounting background that proved invaluable in untangling the financial mess. I had the medical knowledge to recognize the psychological patterns and the professional connections to find good lawyers. Together, we formed an unlikely team bound by trauma, but determined to reclaim our lives from the wreckage Derek had created. The hospital board initially suspended me pending an investigation into whether I had any knowledge of the prescription fraud. The humiliation of being escorted from the building where I had saved countless lives, treated like a criminal because of my husband's crimes, nearly broke me completely. But my colleagues rallied around me, writing letters of support, testifying to my character, making it clear that I was a victim, not an accomplice. Some whispered behind my back, wondering how I could have been so blind, but most recognized the sophisticated nature of Derek's deception. Jennifer's situation was equally devastating. As a stay-at-home mum who had given up her marketing career to raise the children, she had no recent work experience and no financial resources that were not tainted by Derek's fraud. Her parents had to help with immediate expenses, while she figured out how to support herself and 2 children. Tyler stepped up in ways that made my heart break for him, getting an after-school job and insisting his mother use his earnings for groceries. Amanda faced the unique challenge of being pregnant with the child of a man who would likely be in prison when she gave birth. Her family initially wanted her to come home to Indiana to hide from the scandal, but she refused. She said running would make it seem like she had something to be ashamed of when she had been just as deceived as the rest of us. She stayed in Chicago, finding a small apartment and a job at a non-profit that supported women in crisis, turning her pain into purpose. The legal proceedings began almost immediately. Derek was charged with 3 counts of bigamy, multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and forgery. His lawyer tried to argue for mental illness as a defense, bringing in psychiatrists who testified about personality disorders and compulsive behaviors. But the prosecutor showed the meticulous planning involved, the careful scheduling, the elaborate lies that required conscious effort to maintain. This was not mental illness driving him. It was choices, thousands of small choices made every day to deceive and manipulate. The financial investigation revealed even more than we had initially discovered. Derek had been selling information from my medical practice patient names and conditions to pharmaceutical companies looking for test subjects. He had taken out life insurance policies on all of us, naming himself as beneficiary. He had been slowly poisoning Jennifer's credit planning to declare bankruptcy in her name while keeping his own credit clean. Each revelation was another violation, another layer of betrayal that made us question everything about the years we had spent with him. We started meeting weekly, the 3 of us, sometimes with the children, sometimes alone. At first, it was just to share information and coordinate legal strategies, but slowly it became something more. We were the only people who truly understood what each other was going through. When Amanda had nightmares about Derek appearing at her door, Jennifer and I understood without explanation. When Jennifer could not stop checking her son's phone, terrified he was hiding something like his father had, Amanda and I knew that paranoia intimately. The media attention was relentless for months. True crime podcasts wanted interviews. Dateline did a special that we all refused to participate in, though they ran it anyway with actors recreating scenes from our lives. Someone wrote a book claiming to tell the inside story, though none of us had spoken to the author. We became cautionary tales, our faces attached to articles about red flags in relationships and how to spot a pathological liar. But we also received unexpected support. Other women reached out, sharing their own stories of deception. A support group formed for victims of bigamy and relationship fraud. It turned out we were not alone in this bizarre trauma. There were others who had discovered their spouses were living double or triple lives, maintaining complete separate families. The FBI agent assigned to our case mentioned he had seen a significant increase in such cases, with social media making it easier to maintain multiple identities. Derek's trial began 6 months after his arrest. Seeing him in court in an orange jumpsuit, looking gaunt and desperate, stirred complicated emotions. Part of me still remembered the man I had fallen in love with in that university library, the one who had made me laugh during the hardest years of my education. But that man had never really existed. He was a character Derek had created for me, performed flawlessly, until he could not keep all his characters straight anymore. The prosecution presented our case methodically, showing the jury the complex web of deception through charts and timelines that looked like something from a conspiracy theory board. They showed financial records, forged documents, the fake medical credentials. Jennifer testified about the years of lies breaking down when describing how Tyler had stopped trusting anyone, how he questioned every relationship in his life now. Amanda testified, while 7 months pregnant, her voice steady as she described planning a nursery with a man who had already done that twice before without her knowledge. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on the medical fraud, the violation of my professional identity, the danger he had put patients in by forging prescriptions. But the prosecutor also asked me about our personal life, and I had to describe the man I thought I had married versus the stranger who had been revealed. I talked about the 1,000 small intimacies that now felt like violations, every shared moment that had been contaminated by deception. The defense attorney tried to make me seem negligent for not noticing, but I held my ground. Loving someone should not require hiring a private investigator. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 8. When the verdict was read, he looked at all 3 of us sitting in the gallery, and for just a moment I saw what might have been genuine remorse. But then he turned away, and I realized I would never know what was real with him. Even his remorse could be just another performance, another manipulation. After the trial, we had one last meeting with Derek before he was transferred to federal prison. He had requested it, and against our lawyer's advice, we agreed. Jennifer brought Tyler, who wanted to confront his father one last time. Amanda was 8 months pregnant and could barely fit in the visitor's chair. I came because I needed to ask him one question that had been haunting me. The man in the visitor's room was diminished already, institutionalized after just a few months in county jail. His elaborate grooming routines were gone, replaced by prison basics. Without his carefully constructed image, he looked ordinary, forgettable even. Tyler spoke first, telling his father about making varsity baseball, about his mum going back to school, about Emma taking her first steps. He was showing Derek everything he would miss, all the moments he had forfeited with his choices. Jennifer asked him practical questions about assets he might have hidden, passwords for accounts, anything that might help her rebuild. Amanda wanted to know what name he had planned to give their baby, whether any of his plans for their future had been real. His answers were vague, evasive, still trying to maintain some control through withholding information. Even facing years in prison, he could not stop manipulating. Finally, I asked my question. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love any of us? Or were we all just roles you were playing? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw him construct his answer, could actually watch him, choosing what would have the most impact. That was my answer. Even then, he was performing, calculating the effect of his words rather than speaking truth. We left him there and never went back. There would be divorce proceedings, to finalize custody arrangements, to figure out financial settlements, to negotiate. But we would do it all through lawyers. Derek had taken enough from us. He did not deserve another moment of our direct attention. The recovery was not linear or pretty. I threw myself into work with an intensity that concerned my colleagues taking extra shifts and volunteering for the most difficult cases. It was easier to focus on saving other people than confronting the wreckage of my own life. The empty house felt like a mausoleum of false memories, every room containing ghosts of a marriage that had never really existed. I would find myself staring at family photos, wondering if his smile had been genuine in any of them. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, the 3 of us women made a decision that surprised everyone, including ourselves. We decided to stay in each other's lives permanently, not just as survivors of the same trauma, but as a chosen family forged in the strangest circumstances. Jennifer and her children moved to a house just 2 miles from mine. Amanda found an apartment nearby after her son was born, a beautiful boy she named James after her grandfather, refusing to give him any name Derek had suggested. Tyler became the big brother to all the younger children, protective and gentle, in ways that belied his teenage years. He taught Emma to walk, holding her tiny hands as she toddled across my living room during our Sunday dinners. When James was born, Tyler was the first one Amanda called, and he drove her to the hospital when she went into labour, staying in the waiting room for 12 hours until his newest sibling arrived. The financial recovery took longer. Despite the criminal restitution orders, most of the money was simply gone, spent on maintaining 3 households and Derek's elaborate deceptions. I had to sell the house, moving into a modest townhouse that actually felt more like home than the colonial showplace ever had. Jennifer went back to school, getting her master's in marketing while working full-time. Amanda started a successful blog about recovering from relationship fraud that eventually became a book, the profits from which she split with Jennifer and me, despite our protests. My medical license was fully reinstated after a thorough investigation proved I had no knowledge of Derek's fraudulent use of my credentials. The hospital not only welcomed me back, but offered me a promotion, recognizing that my experience, painful as it was, had given me unique insights into trauma and deception that made me a better doctor. I started specializing in treating victims of domestic abuse and psychological manipulation, understanding their experiences in ways my textbooks never could have taught me. We created traditions that were entirely ours, untainted by Derek's influence. Thursday night dinners where we aired our struggles and celebrated our victories. Halloween costumes coordinated across all 3 households. A joint vacation to the beach where none of us had ever been with Derek, creating new memories that belonged only to us. The children grew up knowing they had 3 mothers who loved them fiercely, an unconventional family born from betrayal but sustained by choice. There were setbacks, of course. Jennifer had a breakdown on what would have been her wedding anniversary, unable to get out of bed for 3 days. Amanda struggled with postpartum depression, complicated by the trauma of James's father being in prison. I went through a period where I could not sleep, constantly checking locks and reviewing documents, paranoid that I was missing signs of deception elsewhere in my life. But we had each other through all of it, showing up with wine or tissues or babysitting or just silent companionship as needed. Dating was a minefield none of us were ready to navigate for years. How do you trust again when the person you trusted most turned out to be a complete fiction? How do you explain your situation without becoming defined by it? Jennifer tried first, going on a few dates with a man from her marketing program, but ended it when she realized she was investigating him rather than getting to know him. Amanda and I had not even attempted it, the thought of vulnerability with another person feeling impossible. The children were our greatest concern and our greatest joy. Emma grew into a confident toddler who had 3 houses, but never questioned why that made her lucky rather than strange. Tyler channeled his anger into advocacy, starting a support group at his high school for students dealing with family trauma. James would never know his father as anything other than a cautionary tale, which felt like both a blessing and a loss. We were determined they would not be defined by Derek's crimes, that they would know they were loved and wanted despite the circumstances of their existence. 5 years after that horrible day, I received a letter from Derek in prison. I almost threw it away, unopened, but curiosity won. It was a rambling apology, talking about therapy and finding religion and understanding the harm he had caused. He wanted to make amends, to explain his childhood trauma that had led to his behaviour. I shared it with Jennifer and Amanda, and we made a collective decision. We burned it together in Jennifer's backyard, watching his words turn to ash and drift away. He had taken enough of our time and emotional energy. His journey to redemption, if genuine, would have to happen without our participation. The strangest part of our story was how normal it became. 3 women raising children together, supporting each other through careers and challenges, became our reality rather than our tragedy. Neighbours stopped whispering when we walked by. Colleagues stopped defining me as the woman whose husband had 3 families. We became Jennifer, the marketing director, Amanda, the author and advocate, Brooke, the doctor who specialized in trauma. Our children became Tyler, the baseball star, Emma, the tiny artist, James, the baby, who was loved by many. On the 5th anniversary of Derek's arrest, we held a celebration, not of his downfall, but of our survival and growth. We had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to us and transformed it into something unexpected and beautiful. A family not bound by blood or traditional marriage, but by shared experience and chosen loyalty. We toasted with champagne while the kids played in the backyard, and Jennifer said what we were all thinking. He tried to destroy us, but instead he created us. We would never thank him for it, but we could acknowledge that without his deception, we would never have found each other. The final irony came when Derek was released after serving 8 years. He reached out through his lawyer, wanting to establish contact with his children. Tyler was in college by then, playing baseball on a scholarship, and made his own decision to have no contact. Emma, now 10, did not even remember him. James had never known him at all. The family court gave him supervised visitation rights, but he never pursued them. Perhaps he finally understood that the families he had tried to collect had become something beyond his reach, something real and lasting that his fiction could never touch. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Derek had never been caught. Would he still be maintaining his elaborate deception, adding more women, more children, more lies to his collection? Or would it have eventually collapsed under its own weight regardless? I will never know, and I find I do not care. That life, the one where I was married to a faithful husband named Derek, was the real fiction. This life, complicated and unconventional as it is the truth. The scar tissue from betrayal never fully goes away. There are still moments when something triggers a memory song. We danced to a restaurant where we celebrated an anniversary that was apparently just another performance on his calendar. But scar tissue is stronger than regular skin, less likely to break under pressure. We 3 women became each other's scar tissue, reinforcing the broken places until they became our strongest parts. That Tuesday afternoon, when my phone rang at 2:47, changed everything I thought I knew about my life. But it also gave me something I never expected: a family born not from romance or blood, but from the shared experience of surviving deception and choosing to rebuild together. Derek thought he was collecting families like possessions, but in the end, we collected each other, creating something genuine from the ruins of his elaborate lies. Sometimes the worst day of your life really does become the first day of your real life, and sometimes the family you choose in crisis becomes stronger than the one you thought you were building in calm. I often think about the woman I was that morning, eating French toast made by a husband I trusted completely, heading to a board meeting about expanding pediatric care, believing my life was exactly what it appeared to be. I want to tell her that she is about to lose everything she thinks she knows, but that she will gain something she cannot yet imagine. That the 3 strangers about to invade her perfect home will become her sisters in ways that matter more than blood. That her husband's betrayal will transform from her destruction into her liberation. The children are thriving now. Tyler just graduated with a degree in social work, inspired by our story to help other families navigate crisis. Emma shows artistic talent that takes my breath away, creating paintings that somehow capture both pain and beauty in the same frame. James is a happy, confident child who knows nothing but love from multiple mothers who chose to raise him together. They are not damaged by their father's crimes, but strengthened by their mother's resilience. Sometimes people ask if I regret marrying Derek, if I wish I could erase those 12 years and start over. The answer is complicated. I regret trusting him, regret not seeing the signs, regret the financial and emotional devastation he caused. But without that marriage, I would not have Jennifer and Amanda, would not have Tyler and Emma and James in my life. I would not have discovered my own strength or my capacity to rebuild from complete destruction. I would not have learned that family can be created from the strangest circumstances and still be absolutely real. Before I end this story, I want to leave you with this thought. We all wear masks to some degree, showing different faces to different people, but Derek took this to a pathological extreme, creating entire false worlds that he inhabited part-time. The difference between normal human complexity and what he did was the difference between wearing different hats and being different people entirely. If someone in your life seems too perfect, too accommodating, too willing to be exactly what you need, ask questions. Verify stories. Trust, but verify, as they say. Not because you should live in paranoia, but because you deserve relationships built on truth, even uncomfortable truth, rather than comfortable lies. Did you recognize any warning signs from your own relationships while hearing our story? Have you ever discovered someone you trusted was living a double life, even if not to this extreme? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of survival and triumph. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that you can rebuild after betrayal, that chosen family can be as strong as any other kind, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for something unexpectedly beautiful. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember, the truth might hurt, but lies will destroy you. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to ask questions when something does not feel right.